So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning if you're in the US or in the United States. Today is the first of a series of briefing presentations for our business partners. The presentation is to give you context of how you might position the ClusterSeven solutions based normally around a particular topic, and today's topic is GDPR. The aim of today's session is actually to position us from a GDPR perspective. It is using various tools and techniques that we have within our products. We're hoping to actually position this so you can look at how you can do various activities and actually take a value proposition to your clients and to your prospects to do that. So as you see on the left of this screen, we have the word AIM. Actually, by looking at that, we're going to convert that to FAME. So hopefully we'll have a famous day today. FAME actually stands for Find, Analyze, Inventory, and Monitor. And we're going to use this in this particular way to explain how we add these values. Looking at this from a GDPR perspective, people are very much in a phase of building a list of files, finding the files and building a list in the marketplace today. One might term that as GDPR 1.0. There are lots of tools in the marketplace that do that. I'll name a couple of them here. The people like Informatica, Cloud ID. They're very good at searching across all of the unstructured data and bringing that together to assemble that list. ClusterSeven equally does that. And we can do that. We're not trying to compete in that market, but we certainly have the technology to do that. And we're going to come back on and talk about that a little bit in a while. One of the questions you might ask yourself is, can those tools look inside an Excel file? So they can clearly identify an Excel file. Can they look inside? Can they actually see whether there's something in there of sensitivity from a GDPR perspective? So we're going to pose that as a question to you during the course of this. Thirdly, do those tools provide an attestation process? So the letters I and M here, we're seeing this as what we would term as GDPR 2.0. How do we create a measurable and manageable inventory? And how do we monitor that for change? How do we create a sustainable process? And we're really looking post 25th of May, when EUC comes into force, when GDPR comes into force, and actually helping that take that piece through. So we're going to look at how we can do an attestation process and help you control GDPR content. The third part is around monitoring, and we're looking to not create a list and repeat that process on a regular basis, but to create an inventory and manage that inventory going forward. And we're going to look at how we can help you provide options to monitor that inventory. During the course of this presentation, feel free to post questions to us, type them online, and we'll pick them up and answer them. We're also going to run a couple of polls during the session as well, so just to find out feedback from the audience that's sitting here. So let's have a look at the first of those. So the first of those is inventory. If we go here, most people think about an inventory as a list. Yes, it is a list. And actually, if you look at GDPR 1.0, people are often pulling together a list of unstructured files, unstructured data and files in, funnily enough, a spreadsheet. And they're recording those ready for audit. Actually, we're not referring to a list here. We're actually looking at a process where we can do a number of things along the way to help you create a sustainable process. The first of which is to actually say, okay, I perhaps want to make sure that people attest to my GDPR policy. Where is that GDPR policy stored? Where do you capture that digital attestation? So we have the technology to help you with that and able to set that up very quickly. You may want to look at a slightly different process where you're also trying to have something that's certified in addition to that attestation. That may be that there's a file attached, not necessarily an Excel file. It may be that you're actually trying to record where that file is and who has changed it. So you're capturing the metadata associated with that. If we go back to the old Excel approach of doing that and having a list, it's very difficult to have something that's live and active, of having multiple updates, that is actually a live document or a live process, a proper inventory of all the assets that are being reviewed and managed from a GDPR perspective. What we'll show you later in this presentation is how we are able to look at the complexity of the file and whether it is actually a high risk or high complexity file from a GDPR perspective. This is the direction of the red arrow on the left. What we're going to look at here is determining the materiality of the GDPR content. So from that perspective, we're actually trying to look at materiality of that file. So one of our solutions is called Inventory Management System, IMS. And through this, we're actually able to create very fluid, very active attestation processes here. So the example sitting on the screen here is an example taken from one of our clients, where we're looking at the question that they have posed, not us, they have posed, and actually look at how they can build that questionnaire, that if in their particular scenario, if you answer yes to any of these questions, it actually creates a GDPR flag at the bottom, which is that it is GDPR sensitive and therefore needs to be captured and managed. Now, the idea of this is that you, as our business partner, you can use our products, and we're quite happy to engage with us to do that. We have several partners doing this right now, that you can build your own GDPR assessment and take it to your clients. So you're now capturing that information as your IP in our product. One of the smart things around that is that not only is it capturing a list of questions, it's creating workflow from that. So you're actually able to provide branches in that decision process. So for example, if we went back to the previous screen and one of these questions was a yes, it may produce a subsidiary set of questions, a workflow, if you will. And so we are able to capture that in this process here, and you actually see whether that is, for example, a GDPR file that is not based in the UK because it's actually sitting in the US. For example, that GDPR file is shared with other entities as output. So you're tracking where that goes. So not only are you recording that entity, but also the connections to that entity and actually the workflow associated with it. As I hope you would agree, that's a very powerful process. So that is the first part of what we're talking about from an inventory perspective. It enables us to look at the green arrow sitting on this particular chart here, but actually determine by using these questionnaires both the medium and high materiality from a GDPR perspective. That is really where we're going to cover this for today from the inventory perspective, but it gives the option to define your policy in the client and actually use that policy to drive that. And I've cited one particularly good example. One of our clients, who's one of the major banks here in Europe, used this tool to write a GDPR policy for third-party vendors. So the third-party vendors comes into their environment and their GDPR questionnaire, and they have to attest online with a digital sign-off that they are complying with that bank's GDPR policy. I think it's a fantastic example, and indeed we've got other partners now building out further examples based on this. As I said earlier, if there's any questions or any thoughts you want to come up, then please post them online. So the next part of this is actually we're going to look at find. And the people in Cluster 7 have heard me talk about this several times, and they're all beginning to smile around the room as well. if you want to find the needle in the haystack, i.e. you're trying to find a GDPR sensitive file, what is the best way to actually find the needle in that haystack? And the answer, of course, is actually use a box of matches. So you burn down the haystack, and of course the files are left. And we're going to provide, and we can provide that technology to do that. We also have a very sort of laser-focused process, and we're going to come back to that in a second, how we can actually rifle shoot to a particular file and actually identify things very quickly and help you position this with clients as part of a marketing exercise, as a prospecting exercise. And for those of you who have been with us for some time, we can also use the spider diagram and set up a GDPR profile of that spider diagram to find files across the whole of the estate, and most tellingly show the lineage of those files and where that information is being shared from that source file. Quite unique in the marketplace. So let's look at the first of those. What we are able to do by actually scanning hundreds, if not thousands or millions of files, is we can actually produce a report like this that can be as a GDPR profile. We can scan in a morning 100,000 files and actually determine that these are high risk, these are low risk. Do not worry about the content sitting on this particular screen. This is a proposing of what we can do. This enables a very quick scan of a company's estate to actually find what's sitting there. Let's look at the second example, hunting across the network. So let's say that the red file at the top was identified as a GDPR sensitive file. That's why it's marked in red. We're actually now looking to scan through that. And for those of you who've looked at our spider product before, these are some screenshots of the very new product that we're just about to release. And it's showing you here the hotspots of where these things are, where the GDPR files are located. And you can actually continue to drill down on each of these and continue to look into the detail of what's in each of these nodes. So you're identifying where the source of that data is, who owns it, where it's last been updated, etc. Very specific information and very useful for when you want to build this inventory. The next part is actually looking at how we can do a real rifle shot, looking at how we find these particular things. So we have the ability in a product called Cloud Spreadsheet Management, CSM, where we are able to set up a GDPR profile and actually identify those files that are GDPR sensitive. It will result in a detailed report if you want to go to that sort of level. But I tell you what, let's even better than that. Let's do a demonstration of that and show you how we do that right now. And I'm going to pass over to Vivian, who's sitting alongside me, who will actually show that demo.
Thank you, Tony. So the aim of the demo today is to sort of show you how, using our risk check capability, you're able to actually find the GDPR sensitive files and cells within those files. So what you can see here is we've got a number of files that have been run previously on our Cloud Spreadsheet Manager solution against risk check, looking for GDPR sensitive data, where it's a cell-based rule profile. And a number of these have come up as low, but also as medium and high risk as well. Just in case any of you are wondering why some of these are only have a C, whereas if you look at the all system rules, it's come up with a number of different things like macros, data links, and so on. It's because with all system rules, we're able to look for and drill down to more detail of whether there's anything to do with macros, external data links, and so on. But sticking to GDPR, we're going to look at how we can find the GDPR sensitive cells. So if I go to a spreadsheet that I've looked at earlier that has been run against the risk check, we can find that looking here, you've got a number of rules that we've actually focused on, we believe are GDPR sensitive and focused. So if we drill down to these actual rules, what we're looking at is got gender-specific rules, so that's whether we're looking at Mr., Mrs., Miss, some personal data. We've got affiliation, so ethnic, trade unions, things that you might not think would be captured within a spreadsheet, but they tend to be actually quite relevant and used because spreadsheets are so good for lists, as Tony has pointed out earlier. From this, if we draw back up to the main summary screen, you can also see the number of values within each cell, within each worksheet that focuses on the GDPR sensitive information. And it looks at things like passport, biometric, credit card details, and so on. We can drill down to the cell summary, and looking at this, we now can see which worksheets have actually broken those rules. And say I drill down to credit card numbers, which is that specific worksheet, I've actually managed to filter out all of the other cells that don't contain credit card numbers. And already I can see, if I drill down to, let's say, A4, there's a number of credit card numbers in this worksheet. It's also good to point out that at this level, there's just 3 of the at least numerous amount of ways that you can write a credit card number in a worksheet and an Excel spreadsheet. We're able to capture all of those ways. If I go back to the top, I think it's important to add that even though it says things like UK phone numbers, this is just one example of rules that we can look for. And if there's other rules that you think would be key to finding more GDPR sensitive data, then by all means let us know, because that's definitely something that we're happy to add and be able to provide to all of you for your risk checks. I'm going to hand back over to Tony.
Thank you, Vivian. So just to recap on that, so what we're using here is looking at this from perhaps a marketing exercise, a risk assessment exercise with your prospects and clients. You can ask them to load up a handful of files, 50, 100, run these risk checks. It will literally take a few minutes per file, and lo and behold, you'll have a view with, as we're showing here on the screen here, looking at the high, medium, and lows and determining which of those are now ones that you may wish to investigate further. So this is a very powerful process, and this is perhaps the differentiator between us and people who just find Excel files on the market. Let's step on to the second of the four phases and look at the analyze phase. Let's assume that your client now has got interested and says, okay, how can you help me, Mr. Partner, to do that? And what they will do is we can actually run this in very high volume, and we have done this for years on a client site where we can scan hundreds, if not millions of files. We can sieve and sort those into a short list. We can help you identify those that are GDPR sensitive, but actually indeed a whole bunch of other metrics as well. And we call this a health check. We're happy to provide that to you, the client. You don't have to call it a health check, but you can actually produce reports and statistics around that to help the client not only uncover their GDPR estate, but actually a bunch of other things which may create new projects for you as well. An example of that, again, coming back to this, is we will find this particular data in a particular format and say, okay, this is what we're trying to do, and we're going to do this at scale. And this is the important factor. We're helping you pull this together. And this comes back to the original diagram that I talked right at the beginning, is through these find and analyze processes, we're actually assessing the complexity of the file from a low, medium to high. And really we're looking for the highly complex files, probably because we're looking to get the high material, high complex files as the key ones that we want to manage and govern going forward. As an example, let's say a client has 1 million files, and that is not unusual in the areas that we have been working with. Let's say that when they do this particular scan, they find, and these are very generic numbers, but they will find 900,000 that have either no GDPR or actually have no GDPR risk associated with that. So these can be dispensed with immediately. There may be 95,000, still sounds a lot, but a lot less than a million, that have some degree of concern, and they may or may not be checked. But certainly, we typically against that policy and see whether there's something that you so we're on the last
put those GDPR files into mine and wanting to make sure that if they are changing, how they're changing, and what we can raise as alerts for that. So I've got some files that I believe are GDPR sensitive, and I'm putting these into a monitor so that I can see how these changes are occurring. A base file, and then a number of version 2 and version 3 files. If I draw that to some example of a number of areas of page, to the links within this worksheet, workbook, sorry, and worksheet has been added, a number of named ranges, and various different cell changes have occurred as well. If I drill down to the links to start with, we can now see that there's been a link added to this file. So considering it's GDPR sensitive, if you're taking this data from other workbooks or maybe another system, then something like this is quite key to be able to highlight so that you know exactly where you're getting that information from and what it's being fed to and from as well, and whether that's changed. For example, if a link was deleted and you've been getting that data from there previously, that data could potentially now become stale. It's important to note as well that we provide us with an approval stage throughout this, and at this every level within the comparisons, we're able to add commentary. So, for example, here there's a little call similar to how Excel does it, that highlights the fact that some commentary has been made, and I can look at what comment is. Leave that out, and you want to. If I now look at say, the cell changes, I can see actually so my book. Let's go to connect. I can see that a light green box and number within that as well. So the light shaded area is picked up a range within the worksheet, and the dark shaded area is the area that changed. The red cell is what we're highlighting and looking at, and if you look at this bottom left-hand corner, we're looking at B2, and it has been stayed up. On the right-hand side, we've got a number of filters. So on this worksheet specifically, there's not actually been much changed or added, but there have been 23 datas added, so that's in 23 cells, and with that, a column added as well. If I look at a side-by-side view, it's good to point out that even though this whole column has been added and all of this data has been added, it's not shown that on the right-hand side, all of the data after that has come up as changed. So it's important to point out that this is the case for GDPR files, but also more sensitive files in terms of we can show you how Econ has been
what we got is this sense of doing some very clever algorithmics for you. So we're doing interpretation and knowing that file has been inserted, and actually giving you some thought process behind that. Anybody who's done a lot of work in Excel will know that every time you add a column or a row or do a sort, it's actually quite difficult compared to spreadsheets. This is one of the very, very smart things that the Cloud Spreadsheet Manager, CSM, actually delivers to you.
Thanks, Tony. If we go back to the overview and just spend a bit more time looking at the filters on the right-hand side, there's a lot of things that we're able to pick up. So, for example, whether rows or columns have been added or deleted, but also looking at functions, so data and that's what you want to be able to produce, but not actually look at those recalculations or focus on it. And so from that, you're able to filter out that noise. And if I look at another spreadsheet, I can see here, if I was to just look at that one thing of data that's changed, it's now .com for comparisons, like I mentioned earlier with the review and approval process, we're also able to provide that level of audit trail. So I've made a few comments around different cells and different changes on the links and the worksheets. And here I will see what that commentary is. And if I wanted to, I could go to see the thread, which would then take me back directly to the be able to about GDPR sensitive files and other files that you might have compared. From that, I think it's probably a good time to turn back to Tony.
Thank you very much indeed, Vivian. So I just want to remind people that while we've focused on GDPR here today, actually this technology is equally applicable for all sorts of things. So we have partners now using this for model assurance. We have people using it for looking at internal audit. So there's all sorts of practical use that you can use this monitoring and compare process using it, for example, in the areas. I believe we had a question or two along the way.
Yeah, one question. Can you only search Excel files, or does it also handle other file formats? For example, Word, PowerPoint, CSVs, etc.
The tool is designed specifically for looking at Excel. It can find other things, but we're very focused on bringing up Excel. Although that does raise another point. When we're looking at the inventory side of it, it is not restricted to Excel. So we can actually capture within the inventory any form of EUC, so that may be SAS, Python, tactical SQL database, all those sort of things, and actually use them as part of our assets, if you will, our GDPR assets, our unstructured data that we want to capture and store for audit. So thank you for the question. I think we'll add a little poll in here at this point in time. So you'll see coming up on your screens very shortly a poll, and we'll just ask, we'll pose that out to you, and we'll come back with the responses in a second. So the answer of our first poll is that 91% of the respondees have come back with lists. 9% have sustainable processes. So well done those with the sustainable processes. I think we'll have a quick second poll, if we will, as well, and we'll share these pieces out with you as well later on. One of the questions that posed along the way was it easy or hard compared with what? I guess other types of file, but also easier or harder to find the GDPR data in Excel versus in Word or something like that. The results are in, as they say, and 33% said it was easier, 50% said it was harder, and 70% said it was no difference. So again, an interesting perspective. So let's continue here. So really just want to finalize on the things we've seen in here. Said at the outset, there are a lot of tools in the market that can find the data on the marketplace, and indeed we can do that. We offer matches to burn down the haystack, as you recall, rifles to find that information very quickly, and spiders to crawl across your network. I hope you like all the graphical images that's going on here. Can those tools look inside the Excel file? I think that's a relevant question. We can do that both with the spiders and rifles as before, but also on a more sort of enterprise scale, looking at the health checker process and doing some analytics on that work as well. I think this, when you look at the sustainability of GDPR, as I said at the outset, is that do the tools provide an attestation process? So are they capturing your GDPR policy of staff and your vendors, for example, attesting to that process? And indeed, are your files being captured in as a GDPR file, and are they then being monitored for change on where that's going afterwards? So we're offering both of those within a very simple, easy to deploy solution. And enable you as the partner to build that out in your white label profile to actually present this as your solution to the client using our technology. And last but not least is a number of companies, or most companies, are going to huge effort right now to produce these lists ready for audit around the 25th of May and beyond. Are they going to do that the following week? Are they going to do the following month, following quarter, or following year? It's a huge amount of effort, and really they don't really want to repeat that process again. They like to find a sustainable process. And that is actually what we are providing, whether it's in the cloud or on-premise. We offer the ability to monitor those changes, particularly for Excel, where Excel is one of the chief components of looking for and storing GDPR data, and indeed for sharing GDPR data around. So we feel we offer something quite unique in that marketplace. That really concludes today's presentation. I'm going to see if there are any more questions that have come through in a second, and where we're going to pose that. But I hope that has been interesting. Rebecca, any other further questions that have appeared?
Just one more about how do you find that your clients are usually capturing their GDPR assets in a list? Are they capturing them in Word, spreadsheets, databases? What do you find?
The majority of people that we've seen in the market are storing them, funnily enough, in an Excel file. So they're creating a list of assets and presenting these assets. It may have a lot of information, who owns it, where it lives, etc. The challenge that they have at that point is that list is probably wrong the following day, and even more wrong the day after that. And that's I think where we get down to the sustainable piece. If we can capture that as an inventory as opposed to a list and actually manage that inventory, then actually we're providing a sustainable solution, and actually you, the partner, providing that solution using our technology. I do want to reiterate, we are looking to present these as white label solutions where we can to you, so that you can use and present them to your clients as your solution using your IP, using your knowledge of the subject matter. Today's subject matter is GDPR, but using your knowledge. Any more?
One more. So clients that usually have a GDPR policy, what do you find they're usually requesting against that policy?
That's slightly harder for me to respond. So each client has a different view. We had a debate in the office the other day about what does GDPR cover? What is a legitimate contact, for example? And so each client will determine their own policy. I think that's where a partner can help shape that policy with a client, and actually determine what those questions are. So when I showed you earlier the questionnaire, each client will tweak and move that questionnaire around a bit and create it in a slightly different way. And that's one of the huge benefits of our IMS product. You can present it straight away as a solution, but you can tweak and bend it to do whatever that particular client wants to do without a great deal of work associated with it. Thank you very much, everybody, for your attendance today. I hope that has been interesting. If you have further questions or would like to have a further discussion, please contact myself, Rebecca, or Vivian, and we will gladly follow up. There'll be another one of these along in the next couple of weeks or so on a different subject, and I hope you've found it useful. Thank you very much indeed. Goodbye.